What's up, everybody? Spider-Man Brand New Day's opening weekend has come and gone, and so now I want to dive into 4 key details from the movie, everything from the timeline of this main story to all the glorious X-Men setup being done through Peter's suffering. Let's dive into what I confidently say is my favorite Spider-Man movie, live action or animated, to date. The first thing on my list is that timeline. We got that opening montage of Spidey fighting all his villains, Scorpion, Tombstone, Boomerang, Tarantula, and the Hand. That took place in the 4 years following the end of No Way Home, what would have been Peter's college years. Another way that you can look at that is that it's what he was doing during the events of movies and shows in the Multiverse Saga, like Daredevil Born Again, like Multiverse of Madness, Wakanda Forever, Thor 4, Ant-Man 3, The Marvels, and Brave New World. Then with the main story, that took place after the events of Thunderbolts because the new Avengers already exist and it's before Avengers Doomsday, I assume. Maybe it's very possible that this movie took place in between the events of the Thunderbolts movie and the Thunderbolts post-credit scene, because remember, we do get a time jump in between those two. The credit scene is actually a scene from Avengers Doomsday, so I'm thinking it is between those two movies and what we're seeing in that post-credit scene, which the post-credit scene for Brand New Day very well might be set during one of these Avengers movies. I guess I'll briefly touch on that right now, but I'm working on a separate video building off a theory that I had last year that could possibly connect to it. The base idea is that it's Tom Holland's Spidey, not Toby's like some have been speculating, and he's in trouble trying to call for help using Ned's app. I'm hoping that that video will be ready sometime next week about how Doom would go about doing something like this. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel so that you don't miss when that drops. With that being said, I want to break down MCU Jean Grey, what she does in Brand New Day, what the movie sets up for her future, and what effect her powers had on the memories of the people who used to know Peter Parker. Before I do though, I'm a huge fan of this adaptation of a young Jean Grey. To me, it just feels like the proper introduction to an Omega level mutant being pushed to their breaking point. Even with that though, one thing that I'm not going to budge on now or ever is that she did not take a single life in this movie. Her kill count was 0. Everybody she used her telepathy on throughout the movie was just fine. Even the taxi guy, he's kind of a pussy if he's not fine. Then when she unlocks her telekinesis towards the end of the movie, all the people and the vehicles were frozen, so it wasn't just, pile up after pile up with unconscious drivers. She stopped everything. I'd say the worst thing that she did, really, was kissing Peter through MJ, but that's breakfast in the X-Mansion, so buckle up. Speaking of the X-Mansion, though, I do believe that Charles Xavier is going to find her soon after this bus ride that she took at the end of Brand New Day. In the comics, he finds a traumatized Jean Grey after her best friend was hit by a car, but here in the MCU, I do believe it's going to be the realization that her sister is gone for good that gives her that trauma. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Charles felt the events of this movie, felt what she was doing. He's about 30 miles away in Westchester, upstate New York, but he's a powerful telepath too, so I think that, that's kind of what Feige and co had in mind for her send-off. I guess it really comes down to whether or not he's looking for students yet. And one last thing with Jean, there's a good chance that she restored the memories of MJ, Ned, and Banner. MJ is the one that told us they didn't remember anything after she possessed them, but Bruce says that she broke something in his brain, and Hulk says no Banner, no girl, only Hulk. And those 3 moments make me lean towards no as the answer, even though restoring memories is something that she can do with her telepathy. However, there were also some scenes that prove the opposite, and those are the ones that I'm inclined to believe. You've got MJ crying during the mass psychic freeze, then she goes back to their rooftop holding onto Peter, the necklace that Peter gave her back in Far From Home. Then you got Ned remembering the handshake. I think the argument for this being the way it is would be that Jean was giving Peter his friends back as a thank you for being there for her when she needed someone. That's her way of being there for him in return without physically being present. Well, that in breathing form, of course, but you get the point. The green guy's the most interesting one to me, though. Obviously, in the comics, you've got that famous panel from the 2020 Immortal Hulk run. The big guy remembers Peter Parker, but Banner doesn't, and I think it was similar here. The only time that Spider-Man and Hulk had been together before was the final battle in Endgame as their hero selves, and at Tony's funeral with Peter out of his suit. In my mind, Hulk was aware of Peter and that he was Spider Spider-Man, especially considering the stark connection with both of them in the MCU. And so the combo of that, Peter and Banner's interaction at ESU in this movie, and then Peter dropping his name at the DODC headquarters when he was getting destroyed, gave us a version of that moment. I think it was in the MCU was more so Banner being able to realize that this was the kid who came to him for help, and then Hulk kind of putting together the pieces, and so they just gave up in the fight. From there, I want to briefly touch on the Hand's involvement in the film because it's yet another tie between Spidey and the rest of the street level shenanigans going on in the MCU. First of all, this was not the entirety of the Hand. This was just some of their ninja. The chick might have been a higher up in the organization, but again, this wasn't all of them, and I believe they had an ulterior motive working with the DODC. Metzger tells Spidey something like, they're puppies looking for a mother. I forget the exact quote in the movie, and that just didn't sit right with me, but as I sat with it, I realized they were probably using Metzger to find a new Fist of the Beast. Damage Control is bringing in enhanced threats every day that ends in Y, and so it makes sense to me that the Hand would be looking for a new Hound in that crowd. Maybe Feige wants to adapt Chip Zdarsky's story with the Punisher as the Fist of the Beast. I'm game for that. I love that run, but it's very possible this was setting up their return in Born Again Season 3 with Matt Murdock in jail alongside Elektra. Brad Winderbaum, head of Marvel Television, has publicly said that he wants to bring them back to Hell's Kitchen in that season, and it makes a ton of sense if you ask me. Finally, and this is something that I have not seen being talked about enough, I'm pretty sure Metzger knows Peter Parker is Spider-Man. When Punisher took his shot and Spidey went down, Jean lifted her hold on the city to take care of him, Metzger and his agents included, and there had to be a few good minutes where Peter was just laying there without his mask on. So at the very least, Metzger likely is a face to put a name to in the future. He was not captured by the end of this movie, and if you follow the rumors, he's reportedly returning for the Mutant Saga to be a key player. However, the one thing that might have saved Peter's identity is also Jean Grey. She might have been able to hide them from the view of the DODC like she does when her and Cyclops are pinned down by the Shi'Ar Royal Guard on the moon during Phoenix's trial. The problem with that is that we don't see it. It might be somewhere on the cutting room floor, but it is possible that's the point, and more importantly, Peter gave Metzger the blueprints for his greatest weapon. I would bet the future of humanity that Bill Metzger copied the programming, or whatever the hell you call it. I'm not smart enough for that shit. That was installed in that universal inhibitor that was put on Jean. It's just what Damage Control does. I mean, he literally says that in the movie when Spidey first goes to HQ. They're back engineering Shocker's gauntlets, and so it's not a stretch to say he's going to do this here too, because he had wires connected to it once he had Jean in custody. They could have been copying schematics before Jean destroyed that device, maybe even picked up the scraps to work on those. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a more direct partnership between Bolivar Trask and Bill Metzger in the MCU too. In the comics, Bill lends his malicious mutant intelligence to be paired with Sentinel technology, but I think it's going to be closer to a Red Skull and Arnim Zola dynamic for Feige's vision of the X-Men. And so that's going to do it for today's video. These were just the Mount Rushmore of things that were bouncing around in my head for days after watching the movie. So with that being said, let me know some of the things that stuck with you after Brand New Day down in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel so that you never miss a video. Smash that like button on your way out and make sure you have a great day.